I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, American officials make a secret visit to the Middle East in a bid for peace. A tunnel is discovered in Gaza that's directly under a United Nations school. And one of the world's hottest celebrities has just found out some shocking news about her Jewish identity. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. With negotiations underway, many questions still remain about a possible Palestinian reconciliation deal. And now Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has tried to offer some clarity by promising that any Hamas ministers in a future unity government will be required to publicly recognize Israel. Recognition of the Jewish state is just one of several stipulations both Israel and the U.S. have drawn for the Palestinians. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it very clear that Israel will not negotiate with any Palestinian government supported by Hamas terror. But it looks like some security cooperation is at least still in the works. Just yesterday, Israeli Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon attended a high-stakes meeting in Ramallah, speaking with the PA's prime minister on an array of security concerns and trade opportunities. But until Hamas dissolves its 25,000-soldier army, Israel will not hold any actual diplomatic talks. These are demands the United States has echoed as well, even as Hamas continues to call for the destruction of Israel once and for all. But the White House may be hoping another party can hold some sway in the matter. We've just learned Jared Kushner has been holding secret Middle East meetings in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt last week. This is all in hopes of pushing President Trump's Middle East peace deal. That deal will undoubtedly need to include every possible outcome of these Palestinian unity talks, which means all sides clearly have their work cut out for them. Now, when it comes to the recently renewed and ongoing push for Palestinian reunification, we've heard lots of opinions coming from almost every involved party, except Europe. Well, joining me now is the Austrian ambassador to Israel, Ambassador Martin Weiss, who is here to help us see the reunification talks from his perspective. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
So let's begin with the big, obvious question first. What does Europe think of Fatah and Hamas uniting?
Well, I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, even the talk about reconciliation. I mean, at this point in time, what is happening is that there is a try to get the Palestinian Authority back into Gaza. Our government has visited there, they have seen their ministries. So these are first, if you will, baby steps, which is a good thing. And that's what Europe thinks. It's a good thing. But a full reconciliation, I think, is still far away.
Right. What about Austria specifically? What does Austria feel about this?
Well, Austria is in lockstep with the European Union on this whole story.
Okay.
And we have all seen, just remember last summer, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is terrible. Many people talked about a possible war just because of the lack of electricity, the dire humanitarian needs. So there we were at the brink of war. Things have moved on. That's a good thing.
Now, what happens to all the international deals between the PA and European countries when and if, obviously, Hamas joins the mix?
Well, as I say, I think let's take it easy now.
Okay.
For now, bringing the Palestinian Authority back into Gaza, if that were to work, that's a good first step. But I think if we get ahead of ourselves and talk about what if there were a unified government, what if? There's so many what ifs in the Middle East. Let's do what we have right now.
That's fair. Does Austria consider Hamas a terrorist organization?
Yes, we consider it a terrorist organization. But for now, what we've seen with this situation, there's possibly the chance to increase the flow of electricity into Gaza. Now, that's a good thing. There's possibly the possibility of bringing more Palestinian authority back into Gaza. That's a good thing. And one thing we haven't mentioned yet, we've seen Egypt come back as an important regional player, which we think is a very good thing.
Well, what would it take for Hamas to be redesignated, to get rid of that designation as a terrorist organization, at least in the EU's eyes?
Well, for now, we see that at least they make some movements to come closer to the PA, to let the PA come back, to pull back from the border controls. This is what we are seeing right now. All of this goes into the right direction. But I think you run the risk of destroying anything that might possibly happen now if you talk about the end game. It's like when you talk about a peace deal in the Middle East and you start with Jerusalem. I don't think this is how you want to start that.
Sure.
Now, let's talk a little bit about Austrian-Israeli relations today. What are Austria's interests, especially when it comes to the West Bank?
Well, Austria's interests in the region are to have a strong relationship with Israel. We've celebrated 60 years anniversary last year. We have a lot of economic ties. Israel is the startup nation. To us, that's very important. And of course, in the West Bank, as in Gaza, for example, we have some development aid projects which we think are very important because, like I mentioned, a humanitarian crisis is never a good thing, not for anybody living in the region.
And I mean, Israel, going back to this emerging government in the Palestinian Authority, has announced several times that it would not support a unified Palestine if the emerging government was intent on destroying Israel. And I'm assuming that Austria is on board with that.
Of course. I mean, this goes without saying. But again, I think if it wouldn't make sense to talk about the conditions of an end game when you're at the baby steps of something that's beginning right now.
So here's, I guess, our final question, because unfortunately we are running out of time. What would you say is kind of the biggest news when it comes to Austrian-Israeli relations right now? Are there any big projects that both governments are working on together? You mentioned the startup nation. Well,
I think the big news is that we have, during the past years, grown much, much closer together. The interest is growing on both sides. And that is true for the young as well as for the business sector, as well for culture. So I see a lot of flowers blossom, and I think that's beautiful for me as an ambassador. That's great. Absolutely. Well, we are very happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador Martin Weiss. Thank you. All right, the UN has just discovered yet another terror tunnel in Gaza that's being used by Hamas to launch attacks against Israel. And this one is hidden beneath a children's UNRWA school. Unfortunately, this is an all too familiar story, and ILTV's Aaron Porras is here with the latest details.
Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, no, the United Nations agency has called the discovery unacceptable. Israeli officials, on the other hand, while concerned, are far less surprised.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, United Nations ambassador from Israel, Danny Danon, said it perfectly. He said, yet another terror tunnel under an UNRWA schoolyard. And if it wasn't a terror tunnel, it would be some other terror-related ordinance. You know, there was at least 3 UNRWA schools were used as military weapons storage sites by Hamas during the 2014 Gaza war. Rockets have been fired from UNRWA schools at least twice that we know of during that same war. A tunnel was found under 2 adjacent UNRWA schools in Maghazi in Gaza just this past June, and now this latest discovery. And again, you know, let's not forget that that list was just schools run by UNRWA. This list doesn't include hospitals, densely populated and residential areas, and much more. So to respond earlier to your observation, this is indeed, unfortunately, not anything new. The question is whether or not anything will be done about it this time.
All right, well, let's check out your report.
Israel's United Nations ambassador, Danny Danon, has just condemned Hamas for continuing to put innocent children and citizens directly in the warpath. Quote, "We cannot accept a situation in which UNRWA schools are used as terror bases. This dangerous incident must not be ignored, and strict oversight is needed to ensure that UN facilities are not used to protect terrorists." End quote. This, of course, isn't the first time Hamas tunnels have been found beneath schools or civilian sites. Just a few months ago, the United Nations discovered another tunnel connecting 2 main primary schools in the Strip. These tunnels, along with the horrific war crime of Hamas using human shields, were at the center of the 2014 Gaza war between Israel and Hamas. Independent United Nations investigations have confirmed Hamas had, quote, probably fired rockets from UNRWA schools all over the Strip, deliberately putting its own citizens and students in harm's way.
Former Argentinian President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner has just appeared in court and has finally addressed the alleged cover-up of a 1994 terror attack that claimed 85 Jewish lives. Courts have long accused Iran of sponsoring the infamous attack on the Jewish center in Buenos Aires, and a lead prosecutor was assassinated mere hours before he could testify that President Fernández had covered up Iran's involvement. Well, ILTV's Latin American correspondent Joy Gavillon is here to brief us on this story.
Hi, Natasha. So, people are probably asking themselves, why would a president cover up such an horrific terror attack, right? Well, before his death, Nisman explained this on a local news interview, his last interview, and he mentioned 3 reasons. He said that Argentina wanted to come geopolitically closer to Iran. They wanted to restore diplomatic relations with Iran. And the third reason was that there was an energetic crisis in Argentina, and they wanted to buy oil from Iran, and they wanted Iran to buy grains from Argentina. So you can imagine that the chances to achieve these commerce deals with such a country as Iran weren't as high if the accusations against Iranians were still on.
Absolutely. And he accused the government of making an alliance with terrorists. Why?
So after that, they signed a memorandum with Iran and created a truth committee with members of both countries in order to bring the suspects to justice for interrogation. But what Nisman claimed is that instead of trying to seek justice, the government led by Cristina Fernandez back then actually used this connection to cover everything up. So that's why she was brought to justice, and you'll see what happened in my story. The road to this trial has been long, bumpy, and bloody. Alberto Nisman was the chief investigator assigned to unravel the mystery of the 1994 bombing of the Jewish Center in Buenos Aires, the worst terror attack ever in the history of Argentina. After Iran became implicated in the attack, his investigation hit another bombshell, that the highest levels of Argentina's government were actually covering up Iran's role in the horrific bombing. Nisman then accused then President Cristina Fernandez of personally leading the conspiracy, charges that years later she has now been forced to address.
Esto que han caracterizado como traición a la patria o como encubrimiento, la verdad que la única traición a la patria que hoy hay en el país es utilizar a un poder judicial como el que está aquí en Comodoro Pi para perseguir a los opositores. Yo sinceramente creo que además de ser un gran disparate, creo que lo que se está persiguiendo, el objetivo de esta persecución judicial es precisamente atemorizar a los dirigentes de la oposición. Quieren hacer callar a la oposición en el Parlamento. Absolutamente el gobierno está atrás de esto, con sus operadores judiciales.
For many, however, this denial means very little. That's because Nisman was mysteriously murdered just hours before he could submit formal evidence against President Fernandez. The trial was shelved following his death, then brought back to life in a surprise appeal, and now it looks like all the truth may finally be coming out.
Just last week, Israel banned the corrupt and illegal binary options industry, but apparently that's not the whole story. Because at the same time that lawmakers were writing the bill to outlaw the industry, the government was actually sending over $250,000 in taxpayer money to expand binary options. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with the full story. Now, Brett, first of all, can you put binary options into perspective for us?
Sure, Natasha. Well, until recently, the binary options industry has been operating almost unchecked here in Israel, netting between $5 and $10 billion a year. Problem is, this money basically is stolen from customers who are basically tricked into putting their life savings into, quote, short-term investments. Now, the system is rigged so that they basically never get their money paid back out, and the sellers are even hiding their identities along the way with fake names, fake products, everything. A huge media report exposed hundreds of these companies operating here in Israel, which is why last week's ban on binary options was such a big deal.
Well, it looks like we now know why it took the government so long to finally shut down the industry.
You could be totally right there. We've just learned that between 2014 and 2016, the government handed out at least $270,000 of public money to one of the biggest binary option firms in the country. And that was even after preliminary laws had already started cracking down on these companies. And as you can imagine, this is just quite a mess, as you'll see now in the report.
New reports have just released a bombshell implicating the Israeli government in funding one of Israel's largest and now illegal binary options firms with at least $250,000 in taxpayer money. The Ramat Gan-based firm Spot Option is believed to be at the heart of the illicit industry, one which has duped millions of victims all over the world out of billions of dollars. There are countless horror stories of victims whose lives were ruined by fraudulent Israeli firms, and some who even took their own lives when they realized they'd just lost their life savings. We've learned that this massive government grant to Spot Option came at a time when the Knesset's public face was promising to outlaw the industry altogether.
which is one possible reason why the government failed to publicly declare the grant for 2 years, a move the ministry now calls an oversight. The government was apparently investing public money into Spot Option to expand the firm into China. With thousands of firms still operating all over the world, it's clear that this dangerous industry still has plenty of room to grow.
Israel's West Bank barrier has attracted some of the world's biggest graffiti artists over the years, but a new mural painted onto the barrier is turning more than a few heads. That's because it depicts President Donald Trump sharing a tender kiss with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. As you can see, the immaculately detailed drawing leaves very little to the imagination, and it's clearly had the desired effect. Located in Bethlehem on the Palestinian side of the separation barrier, tourists from all over the world stopped to take in the so-called activist art. This mural is the latest entry from the cult graffiti artist known as Lush Sucks, who has made a name for himself by painting all kinds of different celebrities on the controversial separation wall. This Netanyahu-Trump Valentine took him several hours to paint, which he did under the cover of night. When speaking with reporters, the artist was careful to maintain the aura of his work by concealing his identity.
The message of the work, I don't think there is a message. I mean, most of the stuff I painted is on the wall. The wall's a message in itself. I don't need to write Free Palestine or something like that, something really direct and people will ignore.
The West Bank has become a central attraction for graffiti artists. Banksy has infamously painted several iconic images there over the years, and earlier this year even opened the Walled-Off Hotel, a museum/hotel in Bethlehem that's just a few feet away from the barrier wall. We live in a pretty health-conscious society these days, and more people are taking a more holistic approach to taking care of themselves. Well, joining me here in the studio now is Ori Bar, the Chief Medical Officer and co-founder of Holy Advice, a company that's trying to change how we make choices when it comes to our health. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me,
Natasha. So what exactly is Holy Advice, and what do you do?
Holy Advice is a technological company who specialized, it's a telemedicine service who specializes in coronary artery disease, HIV, AIDS, and respiratory cancers.
Very interesting.
Yes, in the last 3 years, we established ourselves as a technological company who focused on developing smart and intelligent tools for complementary and integrative practitioners.
Interesting. So tell us a little bit about what that means.
We found that no matter where people live, people are limited culturally and geographically by their societies. Usually when we're sick, in Israel as in the US, we usually go to the doctor or to a psychologist. But there are hundreds of thousands of medical methods that was developed for thousands of years, but we are not aware of that can help our problem. Let me give you an example. Transpersonal psychotherapy for cancer or naturopathy for coronary artery disease. Let me give you another example for infertility problems.
Yeah.
Usually the standard treatment for infertility problems is a hormonal treatment. But we usually don't know that there is an energetic problem that can be solved by energetic treatment, like breathing, like guided meditation.
So this is very interesting because you're essentially creating a database or a place in which people can have access to other health methods that they wouldn't necessarily know about,
Exactly.
in the countries that they live in. This is really cool, and it's especially interesting to me because this is something that I studied in the past.
Yes.
So the services that can be found through Holy Advice, why don't you tell us those services quickly? You can search, I see, by specialty.
Yes, you can search by specialty, or there is the Holy Advice research team developed an intelligent tool that it's based on algorithm that matches practitioner and patients. We call it holistic intake, and you can find the most appropriate caregiver for you. and then start
Very interesting.
treating.
Okay, well, this is really, really cool. So what is next? How can we access this? It's a website?
Yes, it's a website and an app.
Okay.
You can access holyadvice.com. If you are a practitioner, you can sign up, open your own digital clinic, and then facilitate your own patients, or get patients through our intelligence system.
Right,
or
so
if you are a patient, you can, of course, sign up, share your medical information with the practitioner, and get treated by the system.
Listen, I think this is something very, very interesting and unique that you guys have created here. I cannot wait to check this out. All right, thank you so much for coming in. All right, ever wanted some personal life advice from Albert Einstein? Well, a handwritten note by the genius containing his personal formula for happiness has just been sold in a Jerusalem auction for a whopping $1.3 million. And we have the scoop on just what it says. By 1922, Albert Einstein was already a legendary physicist, but even a genius has trouble paying the bills sometimes. Einstein was in Tokyo when he found out he just won the 1921 Nobel Prize in Physics. And when he reached his hotel, he realized he didn't have enough money for the bellboy. So what did he do instead? Well, he found a hotel notepad, scribbled his personal formula for living a happy life, and told the attendant that one day this little note would be worth more than the usual tip. And now, nearly a century later, another Einstein prediction has just come true. The bellboy's nephew just put up the note for auction in Jerusalem, netting a massive $1.3 million.
Einstein is a worldwide personality. It's somebody that interests not just scientists, it interests, it's a world, basically there is no kid in the world, I guess, that doesn't know who's Albert Einstein. That's basically it. So when Albert Einstein writes a few words from a deep thought of his heart, what is the secret of happy living, this is something that interests everyone and can talk to everyone.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, so tell me what it says already. All right, I'll tell you, and I won't even make you pay $1 million for it. Here it is. Einstein's very own theory for living life. A calm and humble life will bring more happiness than the pursuit of success and the constant restlessness that comes with it. World-famous actress Scarlett Johansson has just discovered a life-changing piece of information about her Jewish identity, shedding tragic light on the fate of long-forgotten relatives in the Holocaust. ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh has the scoop.
Award-winning actress Scarlett Johansson has just been given a bombshell and learned that several of her ancestors were victims of the Holocaust in the Warsaw Ghetto. During the filming of an episode of Finding Your Roots on PBS, the stunning actress sat with host Henry Louis Gates Jr. to explore her family's history, and she definitely wasn't expecting what came next.
Family name, Schlamberg, first name, Moishe, wartime location, Warsaw Ghetto, circumstance, time, and place of death unknown, children's names under the age of 18 that perished, Zlata, age 15, time and place of death, Warsaw Ghetto. Mondel, age 17, time and place of death, Warsaw Ghetto. Wow. That's sad. Sorry.
People magazine just published a short preview of the episode containing documents from Israel's Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum in Hebrew. Another famous actor, Paul Rudd, had a similar reaction during his appearance on the upcoming episode, where he learned about the anti-Semitism that his grandfather had endured in England during the wake of World War II. The episode is set to air Tuesday on PBS, and it's definitely going to be an eye-opening one, both for the viewers and most definitely for the participants.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. We all need support, and one of the best ways to get that support is through Etzah, which means advice in Hebrew. It's important to listen before you talk, especially when it comes to getting etzah from people like your parents. But remember, while etzah can be very helpful, you shouldn't fully base your decisions on the etzah of people who don't have to deal with the results. After all, you live with the choices you make. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be partly cloudy with scattered showers across the north and a low of 64 or 18 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect more of the same with a high of 76 or 24 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.52 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.